Hello again, everyone. Welcome to this special edition of Discovery Road. In this episode, the story of those who died along the historic Mormon Trail, a touching visit to the forgotten ones, plus Rand's road food and a carload of discoveries. So we'd better get started.
Okay.
The Mormon Pioneer National Heritage Area in Utah is the best example of how the Mormons colonized the West. But to find out how they got there, what they went through, and who the forgotten ones are, this is the place. The Mormon Trail, bypassed by speeding cars and trucks, covered by cities and highways, and swept aside by the winds of time. Martin's Cove, a beautiful, peaceful place where we learn that handcarts cross the plains in about 90 days, carrying no more than 17 pounds of each family's possessions.
Well, those who came from England and when they arrived at Iowa City with all of their belongings found out that they would be in handcarts, and because of that, they were told that they could only have 17 pounds of all of their belongings put together to take with them across the plains. So that was a very dramatic experience, leaving all of their special heirlooms and things behind at Iowa City.
In the visitor center, walls are filled with long-ago names of pioneers, dreamers, and some forgotten ones.
Well, these boards in here indicate the names of the people who are in the Martin Handcart Company in this one, and there were approximately 600, of which, if you look, you'll see the gold. Those are the ones that did not make it. So there was, they think, between 125 and 150 did not make it to Salt Lake City.
And here, frightening images and the riveting account of 13-year-old Heber McBride.
Heber McBride was a young man, 13 years old, and he was traveling with his family across the United States, or the territory, to go to Salt Lake City. Heber McBride's father had helped a lot of people over the North Platte River at Casper, and in so doing got quite sick, and before he made it here, he dies. His son, Heber, goes back to the sick wagon to see how his dad's doing. He wasn't in the sick wagon, he was laying on the ground and dead.
Winter Quarters, a special place revered by the Mormons, and where we found a strong connection to a Utah family and their sacrifice out here on the Mormon Trail.
The spirit that the pioneers had, we were melted into adjectives like education, or education would be one. Learn everything you can learn. Love of family. That was the number one thing.
Bobby Anderson has been working on her family history for years. 2 books later, she has plenty of stories to tell. Her late husband, Phil Larson Anderson, had ancestors who crossed the plains and eventually helped settle Spring City. Bobby's Scandinavian ancestors came to America and were part of the exodus to Zion. But sadly, on her mother's side, 2 babies had to be buried out along the trail. Bobby's mother was forever changed learning that it was her mother and aunt who buried their babies long ago at winter quarters.
The grave sites, the place to bury them in that awful frozen land, were not arranged by that time. So the two baby girls had grave sites there in winter quarters. After that, it was a heartbroken mother to go on to Salt Lake Valley.
A sacrifice out on the Mormon Trail, a family loss never forgotten. And a generation later, her mother loses 4 little boys, opening that wound from winter quarters.
My mother could hardly get out of the front seat, sitting by my dad. And he had to help her get out of the front seat. And we walked around the back of the car, and she fell down on the grass and grabbed the grass by the little plaques on each one of the boys. And like she was digging up those graves. And she was moaning and groaning and saying, "I want my boys back. I want my boys back." We talked about Margaret and Janet and their mother, who had to go through all of that too. It was a horrible, horrible sacrifice for those people. And that's why they're all my heroes.
Heroes and hope for tomorrow. One more thing here at Winter Quarters Cemetery, the bronze statue of a father and mother bearing their child. It's the work of Avard Fairbanks. You can find his pieces in the Utah and Wyoming state houses and in the U.S. Capitol. His bust of Abraham Lincoln is considered among the very best. And for roadside trivia, Fairbanks also designed the symbol used for the Dodge Ram. Avard Fairbanks. His work is showcased year-round at the Fairview, Utah Museum of History and Art. Several of Phil's forefathers fought in the Walker and Black Hawk Indian Wars. Isaac Behunin is credited for naming Zion Canyon. Another relative worked on the spiral staircase in the Manti Temple. And on Bobby's side, more wonderful history. Endless success stories all around.
This is an exciting day for the Badger football program. I'm pleased to announce Gary Anderson is our head football coach.
There are lots of heroes in the Anderson family.
It's a transition for a family at any time, and I'd like to thank my wife Stacy and my 3 boys for, hanging in there with this situation and being so supportive. It's been a big part of it.
The Gary Anderson era begins. Just 4 years as head coach at Utah State. What a job he did there. Now he's got quite a challenge ahead of him.
Truly, a family giving the world wonderful memories and never forgetting the ones who made it happen. This little gathering of Rasmussen family descendants at the Ephraim Cemetery is a very important event.
Tracy Rasmussen, I'm a dental assistant.
I'm Ronald Douglas Rasmussen.
I'm the mother of 9 grandchildren, 34 great-grandchildren, 18.
Kay Rasmussen, Lydia.
Gary Rasmussen.
Jackie Rasmussen.
Cynthia Denise Rasmussen Vaughn. I'm a wife and mother and homemaker.
They're all discovering a bit more of where they came from.
I'm out here a couple of generations. My father is here, and then I'm down this way. So my grandfather and his father and mother, and then their grandfather's father and mother. So I'm a few generations down the line.
So we go back in time even before the Mormon Trail, when Scandinavian immigrants boarded ships, leaving family behind. and then facing the Atlantic Ocean, rough seas, strong winds, and disease. Cholera could wipe out passengers before they ever reached America. On one of those ships were Maren and Jens Jensen. Their ship landed. Their first steps were successful. They made it as far as a place called Wyoming, Nebraska. Mormons gathered there on their way to Zion. But cholera swept through the huddled Mormon pioneers. Hundreds died, including Mars Jensen.
I had a great-great-grandmother who started to come west with her husband and 2 sons, but she had contacted cholera on the way, and she died 3 days out of Wyoming, Nebraska. There was 7,000 Danish immigrants that passed through Wyoming, Nebraska. This experience the last couple of months has given me a connection to the Rasmussens and to Maren and Jens and Hans Peter and Annie Marie, who I'm more familiar with than I have been in the past.
Scandinavians helped settle much of central Utah. Swedes, Danes, and Norwegians made their imprint in the architecture, among the artisans, in the communities, in the family scrapbooks, from the trail to the grave.
I'm very proud of being a Rasmussen, and I want the world to know that there's no greater family in the world than our family.
A family tree, a forgotten narrative, a simple humanity.
This is the Missouri River.
Here we are on Discovery Road, and we are having the time of our lives. We have so much to be grateful for, and we think about the folks that came, that opened the West, and what they did and how they accomplished it. It's really a remarkable feat. And this morning we're making French toast and sausage for our crew here. And Brent, our teacher, our adjunct teacher here on the waterfront. And we're thrilled that Brent could show up. I called him.
Brent, are you from around here? You come down to this part of the river a lot, or?
We live up the road a little bit. I've lived here for 21 years, but I grew up in Pennsylvania.
What brought you out here?
The job, teaching at Creighton. And my wife.
So, what is it these guys catch in here? Panfish, I suppose. Catfish?
Catfish, a lot of catfish. Yeah.
Feet off the bottom.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
Sure. Whoop.
What I'm talking about here. Like breakfast by the river. It's an all-American morning, ladies and gentlemen, courtesy of Rand, Mr. Road Food. Let's
Road Food. Hey. Hey, thanks for coming, everybody.
As we blitz down the freeway, notching mile after mile without a single wince, our technology devices are doing most of the work. And so we think back to William Clayton, who came up with the beginnings of the odometer, inventing a crude way to clock the turns of a wagon wheel and measure distance. Long distance, of course, was the big challenge. A pioneer-era cabin, a framed map of the historic Mormon Trail, and one man's mission to never forget.
Having served again in the Omaha, Nebraska mission, I had an opportunity to take people on tour through the Winter Quarters Cemetery. once they get there and find out they have a relative there, it's universal that they get excited and they want to see that site. They want to see that exact site. And they bring their children and they take pictures and they document things that you tell them. And in any event, being at that winter quarters cemetery just brought everything to focus for me.
Monson's ancestors were among the many Scandinavians who made their way across the ocean, then onto the Mormon Trail.
I think their sacrifices were that I know of at least 3 people in the family group that died, that didn't make it west. What else more can you say as far as the sacrifices that the families make?
One family member died aboard a ship headed for America and had to be buried at sea. The others died heading west and are buried along the trail.
Having served a mission in winter quarters area just in the last few months, the one thing that I got a better appreciation was the number of people and families that came west. There were 15,000 or 10,000 people in Nauvoo that came west, and you have to ask yourself, why would they do that? I think it just further reaffirms the fact that they were willing to sacrifice even their lives for what they were trying to achieve. I don't think that you fully understand that until you're a little older, in a sense, and you see that you have family members that pass away.
Though winter quarters is a long way from central Utah, it's held close to the heart in this family.
Well, I've always been interested in old cabins because there was one on the property that we lived on that my grandfather had erected back in probably 1870. This cabin was built and was located in Ephraim, Utah, and I was able to purchase it, and I took it apart log by log and moved it up here and put it back up, and I'm still in the process of finishing that job.
In Spring City and other central Utah communities, you can find the Scandinavian influence in abundance and lots of Monson relatives. Just ask around. That's how we found Steve's brother, Jay Monson. Hey, Jay, how are you doing?
I'm doing quite well, thank you.
Good to see you.
Nice to have you down here.
Thank you. So what home are we sitting in front of?
Well, the one here, according to family legend, was my great-grandfather's, Peter Moenson, which became Peter Monson, and he lived here. Well, he was well into his 90s when he passed away. So.
Moenson. So the name's different.
Yeah, the Danish had been Americanized to what is now Monson. A lot of people in Mount Pleasant still pronounce it Munson, but I never liked that pronunciation, so we go with Monson.
And the Danes certainly had an influence here.
Certainly, a lot of Scandinavians wound up in Sanpete. In the area where we are now and where I live, which is a couple blocks west of here, at that time was called Little Denmark because there were so many Danes living here. In fact, as I grew up, Danish was spoken in the home a lot.
The part that I'm intrigued to talk about, Jay, is these wood shoes here, and the story that you're going to share with us is intriguing. How did you come into those, and are they the real thing?
They are the real thing. And there were numerous things in the home where I live now that belonged to the family. And among them, we just sort of confiscated them and kept them to ourselves so that we had them. But Great-Grandpa Peter made wooden shoes in Denmark. And when he came to the United States, he brought the tools to make wooden shoes. And how you do it, I don't know, have no idea. But my grandfather, James, when they went to school in those days, when the weather was good, they went barefooted. When the weather turned cold, they wore wooden shoes, which Grandpa made for my grandfather. And he was very proud of them because in some ways, he was the only one in his class in school that had shoes.
No kidding. Times were tough.
Yeah, that's right.
Bounces out of the pocket. Waiting. Here's the pass. Touchdown!
From those early tough times to the family successes generations later.
He was very proud of having his wooden shoes. He said there was only one negative thing about them. He couldn't run as fast in them. But there's something else, aren't they?
They're really incredible history. Suppose that, if you're going to walk in the shoes of your ancestors, you have to try these on, Jay. So. It's one thing for friends, family, or neighbors to borrow a snow shovel, hedge trimmers, or take a look at a family photo for a while. But these shoes are much different.
They came to borrow things that belonged to Grandpa, and then they never came back. So we've stayed very close to these and plan on continuing to do so.
Hi, everybody. Jay Monson along with Blaine Fowler. Running play, Stinnett to throw, throws it back to Young. Young touches the ball. They do score! They made it! BYU did it! What a play!
The shoes, those family heirlooms Jay was so fond of, are passed on now, nourishing new souls.
These are my great-great-grandpa's shoes, and his dad gave them to him. And they are made out of wood, and they're painted with this kind of suit.
A pair of shoes, a family story, not lost and not forgotten. A reminder of all those miles between then and now, of every step, a keepsake of those who made the journey. Thanks again for joining us for this special program along the historic Mormon Trail. I'm James Nelson, and we'll see you next time out here on Discovery Road.